On behalf of our gifting partner, Digitech, the DSLR category winner, Deeksha Rathore, has won a Digitech Tripod DTR 500BH worth 4,995 rupees. And our smartphone category winner, Aslam Syed, has won a Digitech Gimbal DSG 005 worth 10,995 rupees. Congratulations. Nitesh Mohanty is our mentor judge for the Frame Through Doors and Windows contest. Today, he will be telling us about what went through his mind while he was selecting the winners and honorable mentions. He is a visual artist who works at the fluid intersection of arts, culture, media, education, and self reflection. His theoretical interests are also wide, often inquiring about the roots or fundamentals of art history, storytelling, and philosophy. He is currently heading the Crafting Creative Communications program at MICA, where he shares the relationship between art, design, photography, and cinema through a course called Ways of Seeing. Nitesh, would you like to take over?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tanvi. It was such a joy looking at the images that came across through the contest. And I remember 3 weeks back when we started this exercise, I told myself, oh, doors and windows, so what's the big deal? But I was overwhelmed with the kind of entries, the kind of submissions that were passed on to me. And I must accept and admit that I had a tough time choosing between the whole lot. And I don't want to discredit all the people who are not included in this shortlist because even they had something very unique and interesting to offer. It's just that sometimes you lend your heart to a certain image for specific reasons, and that's the reason why something else gets left aside. So I'm going to try and deliberate and speak about what touched me, what moved me, what made me choose these photographs, starting with the DSLR section.
Okay, so
Yeah, so when I saw this image by Renu Dhiman, I immediately was reminded why we give so much of value to light in photography. And if you strip down photography to basic fundamentals and basic rudimentary ideas that create a magical moment, it's light, color, shape, form, and coming of all of these together to create a composition. So when you see this image, there is not just a sense of ambiguity, but also all these very core elements that magically come together. You see a streak of light forming that beautiful angular shape upon the wall, and then you're constantly wondering where is this light coming from. I think a good photograph is also that makes you question, that makes you wonder. Uh, at the same time, allows you to unravel. It's almost like entering a labyrinth and discovering things. So I thought this was a very simple moment as such, one person standing against light, having a shadow upon the wall. But I think that's the bright red color, which almost reminds you of Rothko's, the fields of color that he paints. And there's something very painterly, something very graphic, something very ambiguous, something very enigmatic about the moment. You just can't help but look at it for moments together without getting distracted, without getting bored, because within so little, so much is being offered for the onlooker. So immediately this photograph made it to the cut. Yeah. Yes, we always talk about irony, humor, quirk being a part of photography, documentation, street photography, and I think all those intrinsic elements come here. And I think what I loved about this image by Anuradha Chatterjee is the role reversals. It's like how how we are constantly living in a society where we think women are the one who gossip and who have all the time to talk about the stuff that they talk about. But here it almost is made for us to look at three men gossiping or passing a comment or sneering about this woman who's passing by, which is also a mirror to our society. So I thought there was a very interesting play of irony, reality, within a very street setup that we pass by every now and then. But to observe a moment, of wait for a moment like this to unravel and to hold it, I think that's something that caught my attention. But what I also discovered while gazing into this image for a little more is the reflection of a vehicle passing by against the mirror, against that the reflection. I thought that also added a little element of interest, because if you remember how Katya Bresson talks about surrealism as a part of something that fascinated him about photography. I think the play of lines, the intersections that the photographer has been able to hold through the reflection on the glass, on the wall, on the floor, and the movement of the woman and the three men, almost like gossiping about, or passing a comment. It just made a very interesting social documentary and also an everyday street scene. So I loved this image. Yeah, I think I'm assuming this photograph is something that people will say, but what's so extraordinary about it? But again, if I go back to some basic principles of how a window has been used in an interesting way to look outside and offer these little stories that are happening in each vertical column, and the whole the movement of the human figures, from someone standing and you see the full figure, then the half body, then two bobbing heads. It's almost like musical notes. And I thought the verticality in which the image is being cut also added a very interesting element to that whole musical, because when you look at a musical note, you see all this vertical and horizontal lines and the little dots and dabs. So immediately the moment I saw this photograph, it reminded of music, and in spite of all its silence, it it kind of creates some musical thing in your head, and that's why this photograph by Rishi felt special to me, and that's why it got selected. Yes. Yes, I mean, one thing that I've always been fascinated in images is the negative space and how powerful it can be to tell the story of what you're trying to say. Now, if this photograph would have been cropped in any other way, where you don't see so much of the wall, it would still mean something. But I think the moment you see the whole chunkiness and how the photograph is divided in two parts, one part being the solid wall and one part almost broken, like this little window which almost looks like a jail, or someone who's entrapped, and someone who's kind of isolated from the world outside. It just made me realize in a very interesting way of the lives that we are living right now, holed up inside the confines of a house, looking outside for solace, for escape, for something to latch onto that gives us hope, that gives us some kind of positivity. So I think this, in spite of it being a very okay everyday slice of life image, the expression on the woman's face and the way she's holding the bars of the window made me read into it much more than I would usually read into it. And what I thought was the whole division of the emptiness of the wall and the clutter of things that are kept in and around the window pane, like that little plastic bottle, the flower pots, the presumably the curtains which are now tied up. All those little details and elements made it very dramatic. It's almost like it was all art directed for us to look at and see it the way we are looking at it. And I think that very stark juxtaposition of emptiness and crowd and nothingness and hope just kind of made me look at this image with a lot of interest. So Chandrasen, that's a great image. Okay, the moment I saw this image by Sakshita Patwa, I was reminded by the idea of home and how now we are being witness to idea of home that we had never perhaps observed as keenly. Like I think home is a very interesting subject for a whole lot of photographers, and it is an ongoing engagement and preoccupation. But the way people have now started considering, understanding, reflecting upon the idea of home post COVID is very interesting. It's about roles, it's about people playing their parts and people playing parts that they had never played before. So I think it's interesting how the whole the politics of home and the roles come into play. So when I saw this image of Sakshita, I was just reminded of how men are now an equal participatory part of the idea called home. And through this image where you see two doors opening, one is the door of the fridge and one is the door of the kitchen, and how the two members of the family are now engaging in kind of going about the everydayness of life. I think what also caught my attention is you don't see the two people's face, and I think that becomes an interesting way of also talking about people who you're documenting, because they could be anybody. They could be my dad, my mom, or anyone. The moment you don't reveal the face, I think you're opening out uh, the relatability factor to a very large extent, and then you immediately resonate with an image because it reminds you of your own space, the clutter of your house, and the role that your mom plays and your dad is trying to add as an helping hand. And that was not it. And I think there's something very beautiful about everything else coming together to form this picture. That little magnet called love dogs, and on the right you have this little cabinet and a teddy bear on it. So I think so there are two kinds of images. In There's one image in the first 3 seconds you read into it in its totality, and one that makes you pause, makes you travel into it and try and makes you engage with it. You try and look at it as almost like discovering small little things that have made into that moment. And I think that's why this photograph by Sakshita made me pause, made me realize, resonate, discover, and all those things made it like to be a very fascinating image. So the next image that I have shortlisted is Suresh's image. Now, in contrast to the earlier image, uh, this is very simple and straightforward, but there is a sense of humor in it. There's a sense of irony in it. There's a sense of drama in it, which is very restrained, but it just makes you smile, and it makes you you see the kid's leg popping out and the woman's head popping out, and there are two people in the frame, and how there is a sense of, again, a very interesting sense of ambiguity and enigma, but in a very light-hearted way. And I think so this photograph without the legs popping out from the lower part of the window could have been just another photograph or just another moment in the day, but just to be able to catch the little nuance of life, of how the kid is trying to tangle the leg out and sitting there and also looking outside perhaps, and you don't see the kid's torso and the head, which reminded me of the hopper example that I had showed, that there is sometimes, to be able to find a moment where there is a lot to unravel and a lot to decode, is also something that you must offer the viewer. So in that sense, it was a very light-hearted moment, and also very interesting in terms of his juxtaposition, the use of the top part of the window and the lower part of the window, which made me look at Suresh's photograph with a lot of interest. Moving on, I loved this photograph by Prerit Sharma from Jaipur, and I think these are the moments that are you immediately get drawn into in photography, where there's a whole lot of thing riding on chance. Now I'm sure Prerit must be standing there, perhaps waiting for something to happen on the other side of the terrace or not. But he's found this very interesting moment where you have three people within the canvas, and three of them are directed in three different directions through the way they're sitting, the way they're looking, the way they're moving. And almost like in such images, you're tempted to question, is this staged? But I hope not. I hope Prerit has caught this moment in his intuitive way of imagining, now this person who perhaps is doing his evening walk will stroll by and I'll catch the moment. And also the play of lines, like I had told in one of the earlier images, I think it is so important that you understand that this moment perhaps would have been very bare, but with the vertical and the horizontal lines coming through the door, one closed door, one open door, one set of windows open and one set of windows shut. I think it just gives a very interesting reading into the theme and the subject, and how the human elements then elevate the drama within the whole canvas. So that's why I think this photograph becomes very interesting. I love this photograph by Prabal Banerjee. I hope I'm pronouncing Prabal correctly. But what was interesting is this almost looks like dolls kept on windows. The first time you look at the window, you can't imagine them to be real children, flesh and blood, and you have to take few seconds to realize no, they are actually real because of the fact that they're so doll-like. I don't know which part of the country this or world this photograph is taken, but I think it's very interesting of how not just the use of window, but the placement of figures within the window, and also the the reflection of the outside world upon the window. All these elements coming together makes this photograph very fascinating. But what really caught my attention is the little blue thing at the bottom, which made me wonder what it is and how it is suddenly bobbing up from the lower part of the frame. And so the moment I saw the photograph, I loved it, but then I started noticing different little things. There is some text also, which is also on the left side of the window. You see the reflection of the text, the typography in it. So I think what I'm always fascinated is how much, see, today we are living in a world in which we are consuming images like nobody's business, and for an image to hold your attention is, I think, a lot. And for me, this photograph held my attention. It again drew me in. It let me discover different things and made me question who these people are and why they stuck where they're stuck, what is going on in their mind, and are they really sad, or they're wondering, and what is going on. So I think there's a lot to unravel and engage, and that's why this photograph becomes very fascinating. Another photograph by Prabal. I almost didn't see the child on the foreground. Now that's I think that's something that you as a photographer are also, I don't know how conscious or irreverent you are of the fact of how you're holding a moment and how certain moments are so quiet that they don't immediately reveal upon you. So the first thing I saw was the little kid on the window sill on the chair, and the mother looking outside, and it made a very photographic, and it made a very cinematic moment. And but the moment I started peering into it, I discovered the cushions, the pillows, and the little infant on the bed, and that really touched my heart. And I think these, I mean, if you're a photographer, you're always moving in and moving out, going close to the subject and going far, trying to question what am I holding and why am I holding. And I think, I'm sure Prabal is sensitive enough to understand that there could be two images. One is just the child on the window and the mother looking outside, and that would have been just another ordinary image. But just by stepping back, he's been able to hold another child on the bed, and again creating this very lyrical moment of three lives, completely detached from each other and yet being very integral to the moment that he is holding. And that's why this photograph becomes extremely special for me. Yeah, I mean, so something very simple and something very graphic. Something, it's almost like it looks like a collage, as if person has three pieces of paper, blue, yellow, and peach, and that person is Dipyan has torn these paper and stuck it on a black piece of paper for this to look so sharp and interesting. But what I love about this photograph, Tanvi, is when you look at it, you know that it's a shadow of perhaps one bird flying away. And but when you go close, you see there's a twig on the bird's mouth, on the bird's beak, and that you see only in the shadow. You don't see in the bird flying away. And I think that's magical, because you might look at it and say, okay, fine, it's ordinary, it's just another flying bird. But that little twig made me feel for the moment, because I think it's, again, you're looking at structures, you're looking at home or a building or a house, but you're also looking at a bird carrying a twig to build another house. And I think perhaps it's my ability to read into it like a reader rather than just look at it visually and say, okay, fine, or a good composition. But I'm thinking more that as we try and engage with the thousands of images that we come across, I think we have to become Teju Cole and read into it and write out of it rather than just admiring images for what they are. So I think that's me overreading into the Björn's photograph, but I love it. Yeah, I think we have a winner here with Diksha's image. And the more I try and look at it, I feel that there is so much that is being held in this moment and so quietly. I think I love art or cinema that is restrained in nature, where you're not trying to overdo, you're not trying to oversay, where you're providing a very quiet moment, almost as a poem that was not written for anyone but for your own self. And this portrait of Diksha is a moment like that. I feel that it's almost like you're wondering, where is the glass, where is the window, where is the reflection, where is the sunlight falling from? And there is so much to hold in layers. And you have the buildings in the background, you have the home from where she must have taken this photograph. And I think the ability to again try and question how did this moment come together made this photograph extremely fascinating. And because I'm such a ardent follower and fan of Saul Leiter and his whole enigmatic play of light and glass and reflections, and how he's able to do that, I think this moment comes very close to that sense of how did this happen. And like I had said, that there's something very collage like in the earlier image, there is also something very collage like in this image, but not in a sharp and graphic way, but in a very lucid, in a very dreamlike way. So I thought that this moment had to be really, really special for it to be the winner within this category. Yeah. So should we move on to the smartphone category? And I'll just take you through the, the photographs that caught my attention. Rishta Sharma's photograph. Now, we all have seen silhouettes against window panes. We've all have such moments that have happened to us in our lives. And I have a very similar photograph. But what I loved about this image is, how the posture of the person is breaking the whole verticality of the window. And what if you look closer, there's a little grill work that is on the window, which is also imitating the bend of the hands in a reverse way. So again, I could have easily passed by this image saying that, okay, okay, this is just another moment in someone's life. But the way you are able to look at the reflection, the window pane, and the window panes on the left and right side of the image almost makes it, and if you squint your eye and look at it, it almost also looks like a face in a very surrealistic way. So I think the there's a very thin line between an image looking ordinary and becoming extraordinary. And perhaps as a photographer, you identify that moment or you don't, but only when you are able to assimilate all of these little details in a very personal, intuitive way. Perhaps this moment has happened in my life before, and that's why I think we bring in a lot of our world into the world of the photographers while selecting what we like and why we like. And that's why this photograph of Rishita becomes very special. Again, a moment that we've always or might have seen, have experienced, because we all have done train journeys. But I think the more I look at it, the more I'm, I'm compelled to question about um, the life of the person, the reason for her tiredness, and also the very interesting play of light which allows us to look into the details of the landscape outside. I'm a sucker for train journeys, and call it nostalgia, call it being romantic, because that was the first mode of transportation when we had to go outside of our state, of our city. So I have these vivid memories attached to train journeys. And I think, so that's why when writers or filmmakers or photographers create stories, the readers only like them or understand them because they have lived those stories themselves. So I immediately was drawn to this moment because I've had such vivid memories of my mom inside the railway bogie and by the window. And I think that's why there was something very soft and tender about this image. But the more closely I looked at it, I also saw someone sitting on this side of the frame, which made it fascinating because Nitin easily could have gone closer and just got a more tighter image of the lady or whoever she is. But the fact that he also brought in the human factor on the right corner of the frame makes it interesting, because it also tells us that in a moment of isolation we are not truly lonely. We are not truly in our own little world that we want to be. So I think that kind of a little juxtaposition made this moment very interesting for me. Yeah, I mean, from all the photographs that I saw as submissions, this one was a very interesting mix of photojournalism and a social documentary. Because you see when you look at the image, you see these cops parading, and you see another cop standing there, and you see this very poignant portrait of a boy looking outside from the closed encased window of a vehicle. Now it just kind of gave me a very vivid picture of our country today, how we are all encased within our little worlds, looking at what is happening in the outside world through our mobile phones, through the windows and the screens of our mobile phones and televisions, and we are just mute spectators to all the upheavals that are taking place, and uh, all the turbulences that we are just being witness to. And I think this moment allowed me to bring in the or reflect upon the politics of our times, and how sometimes the window uh, makes us nothing but mute spectators to everything that is unfolding around in the world. And that's why this photograph by Naman Srivastava really caught my attention, because I think it was talking about something that is currently happening in our lives in this country. Moving on to a very simple photograph by Praveen Kumar. But what was very interesting to see the pot reflected within the frame. Now, we've spoken about the idea of frame within a frame, but here how he's magically found, discovered that, hey, there is a pot also that is being reflected on that window, is very fascinating. Because the moment you almost are being witness to the juxtaposition of two kinds of nature. One is out there in the wild, and one that is growing within this terracotta pot. And I think in a very clean, he's been able to create this very clean composition. Because if this white wall behind would have been slightly crowded or busy, this kind of a very well held, well composed imagery wouldn't have come about. So I think I will give it to Praveen to be able to spot this little pot within the frame and be able to hold all of it together in a very simple, but uh, in a deceptively simple way. I think these moments are very layered and complicated, but you have to just find a way to hold it to make it look simple. Yeah. I love this photograph of Pankaj Harolikar because of many things. One is again how he's being able to bring in the idea of window without showing us the window. And I think that's very fascinating, because it has inspired me to say, hey, there is another way of capturing windows or framing windows without actually showing it. But I think what he has done magically here is play with shadows and create interesting dichotomies. Because if you see this little poster here, it says think twice. and there are two puppies, within that little frame, and this one dog who's chained on the right side. Now these two puppies are free, and they're perhaps looking at this dog chained on the right side, saying, "Hey, think twice. This is what our future is going to look like, perhaps." So I think he's created so many ways of engaging with this image by taking away the window and creating the reflection, bringing in the figure, which is almost like the shadow portrait, and the interesting conversation that these two puppies inside the frame could be having with the chain dog outside. And also the whole juxtaposition of these diagonal lines and the little patterns that are being formed on the wall. And I think this is a very magical moment, and I hope Pankaj keeps shooting these things to inspire us to reimagine frames and windows. Yeah, I think we are also re-looking and revisiting home through this whole series because of the fact that these are these are very recent images. That's what I'm imagining that people have made within the confines of the houses that they are in. Now again, unlike the earlier photograph where you saw two people engaged in activity, here also it seems that two people are engaged in activity, but they are so disconnected, and how the two doors also become like two little lenses through which we can view their worlds. And how in the earlier photograph where you could see a daily chore and a kitchen activity being played upon by two people, here it's complete uh, separation of their existence within the same space. So it also talks about the relationships that people have in closed spaces, and how those relationships have now are being questioned or reflected upon because we have nowhere else to go. Because I think home is always an idea where we come back to. We are always outside, we come back to home. But here, I think two people or the people that we see in our daily lives have no other place to go. So how they engage with their spaces and create their own little worlds is very interesting. How this photograph actually also talks about the same thought. So that's why I thought this was a very uh, good photograph. Yeah. Yes, I've always been fascinated by what happens when you look at figures through lift doors, through glass panes, through window panes, through reflected surfaces and structures, the kind of distortions they go through. But what was interesting about this image is the placement of two figures, one at the bottom and one on the top left, and it was almost like is it the same, and in some strange sense I was reminded of Inception, of like a dream within a dream within a dream, kind of an idea where you don't know if in a very interesting way the photographers making us engage with, and I think I can see the shadow or the reflection of the photographer somewhere in the center, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a very fascinating geometrical arrangement of a structure. But I think the human element, and one being dwarfed and one going up the elevator or the escalator, that's what I'm imagining, makes this image such a fascinating image. So Suraj, well done. I think this is a great moment. Yeah, I think we come to the final photograph in this segment, and I think we have a winner here with Aslam Saeed's portrayal of Mumbai. Um, Now, the moment I saw this, the way Vodafone has brought the pug into our life is like pug means freedom, pug means friend, pug means traveler, and to see the pug tied onto that through a leash onto the door made me think about something about how our cultural references, the moment they are projected or presented to us in a slightly skewed way, makes us uncomfortable because they are such strong moments that have been perpetuated through advertising or popular culture or through cinema. So first, I was kindly taken back by that aspect of the pug being tied onto the door. The second thing was this very interesting idea of the one window which almost looks like the door where you see the woman, and one door which opens where the pug is tied. And the moment I saw the two lives, life of the pug and the life of the woman, And I'm seeing that two ideas of uh, domestic lives entrapped in certain sense, and tied into certain habits of social structure. Now, you could talk about the empowerment of women, because she's not just sitting there in which looks like a place where you get your everyday things, but there is also a sewing machine, and there's a heap of clothes. And it also talks about that she could be multitasking, she could be running that house, she could be playing a role of a tailor, she's also running the shop which has pan, bidi, cigarettes, eggs, and everything, everyday utilities. And also perhaps she has no time for that little pug, and that's why he has to be tied onto the door. Now, I think there's so many things that are being revealed upon us. And I love photographs which make me question about the lives of the people who are held within the image. And these are nobodies for me, right? Like, I don't know who the woman is, I should not be empathizing with the pug. But the moment you place a subject in a certain way, then you compel the onlooker to excavate, to unearth, to unravel these things that you have held. And I think that is the most fascinating part about reading images, because you're not just being a passive viewer, but you're almost like you're someone's holding your hand and asking you to step into the moment, to make this moment yours, and then start questioning everything that you're seeing. And for me, that's why this photograph becomes very interesting, because it makes me think so much. It makes me engage in a conversation with the subject, with the idea, with everything that I'm being exposed to. And apart from the fact that, the verticality of the yellow and the graphic geometric play of forms, I think the pug and the woman and their lives and their idea of domestic entrapment, and yet a sense of empowerment, makes this photograph very layered and interesting to read. Yeah, and I think so. Yes, we have the winners here. Yep. Are we good?
Yes, thank you so much.
Welcome.